What have been your most bone-chilling, hair-raising, let's get the hell out of here, experience? Story 1. I don't tell this story often, but this seems like a good place. Back in college I used to drive up the Oregon coast on weekends, then just crash in my car when I got tired. I woke from a nap in the driver's seat and something just didn't feel quite right. It was just dusk and the light was fading pretty fast. I yawned and stretched, and as I did so I turned my head to the side and just caught a face ducking down below my rear passenger window. I went to hit the lock button just to make sure, and in my panic I accidentally unlocked the doors briefly and then locked them again. I stared at the window for a few minutes, knowing that someone was crouching just out of sight. Eventually, I started the car and thought I heard a scuffing sound. Whoever it was didn't reappear, but that was enough for me. As I knocked out of there and pulled out back onto Highway 101, I glanced back and a bald figure in a red t-shirt with something wrapped around his face booked it into the woods on the side of the road. That was the end of that weekend trip. I drove the 2 hours back to my dorm room, white-knuckled hands locked on the steering wheel. I had to pull over a few miles down the road though to deal with the adrenaline shakes. Story 2. When I was a teenager I was awoken to a sudden chaos in my house. I come out of my room to see my dad but naked except for his red wings with a pistol in his hand absolutely tearing through the house towards the front door. My mother swoops me out of the way and locks me in and herself into my sister's room. Apparently someone was trying to break into my window and had not realized my parents' window was right by mine, small craftsman style home. My dad woke up, grabbed the gun and chased the dude down the street naked with a gun at 3 a.m. Screaming, "I'm going to find you, motherfucker." Pretty sure every neighbor called 911. Cops come, police helicopter involved, the whole 9 yards. Turns out the dude was some wanted person who'd been outside my window long enough to have smoked a half a pack of cigarettes. Probably the only reason he didn't get in was that we had storm windows. Which is what he was trying to pry off when my dad woke up. They did end up getting him hiding in a neighbor's shed. Now I was born when my dad was only 21 and I was prob under 15 at the time, so he's only mod 30s. My dad was a construction worker who was like 6 feet 2 and he started going bald young, so he shaved his head and had a huge goatee. He was very menacing looking when he wanted to be. Thank God no one had security cameras at the time, because the image of that angry naked man with work boots on running down the middle of the road kept the neighbors' tongues wagging for months as it was. This was the mid-90s. Story 3. When I was about 11, this house down the street from my grandparents had a reputation for being haunted. One day I was walking to the shop to get supplies for my grandparents and I saw the owner of the house outside. He was about my dad's age and started talking to me. I really wanted to be the first of my friends to go in the haunted house, and I was asking a million questions about ghosts and stuff, and he told me I could come in and see if I wanted. I said I had to go do my errands, but he was pretty convincing and promised he wouldn't tell anyone. So up his driveway and into the haunted house we went, but I heard him lock the door when we got in, and for some reason I was hyper aware of it. I said I changed my mind and he kind of blocked me from the door, trying to change my mind and calling me a scaredy cat and stuff. I don't remember exactly what happened for him to let me out, but he did, and I ran for my life. Sat at the shop for ages just shaking and wanting to puke without even knowing what I was scared of. Anyway, turned out later it wasn't a haunted house. The guy was a pedophile and serial child rapist. His house burned down while he was in prison. Story 4. 2019 summer, I was house sitting for my dad while he was away for work. The house is in the middle of nowhere and barely even on Google Maps. Usually when friends would come over I would have to drive to the top of the nearest paved road and lead him down a few more I-paved streets to my dad's place. I had had a few drinks with friends and been dropped off by a friend that lived close by. He dropped me at the side of the house because it was easier for him to turn around there. So I walked up the stairs and entered with my key through the side door that led to the kitchen. The kitchen overlooked the front garden, but the front door was nestled into a small porch and wasn't visible to me. I saw a movement in the front garden while I was making tea in the kitchen and immediately turned off the lights. There was a man trying to look into the kitchen windows from the garden. He ended up walking around to the wall-to-ceiling glass doors around the back of the house, cupping his hands to the glass and trying to look in. I wasn't completely sober that night, so I remember just thinking the situation didn't seem real. He couldn't see me in the dark, but I was hiding behind the wall that separated the kitchen from the dining, lounge area, open floor plan. I had stupidly not locked one of the glass doors closer to the front door and he started entering the house, in the pitch black, not realizing I was maybe 10 feet away from him. I had already called the friend who had dropped me off as I knew he was still nearby. Cops would have taken at least 30 minutes to get to me, knowing his parents, ex-military, kept a gun in a safe in the truck. I remember just wanting to run, get out of the house ASAP. The situation didn't feel real at all, like something from a movie. I was acting on adrenaline. But if I ran, I'd be alone in the middle of nowhere with a deranged man chasing after me. As the guy walked further into the house, I stepped out and pulled a knife on him. Again, I was not sober. It was a very stupid thing to do. He tried to incoherently make conversation, but I got him out of the door just as my friend pulled up with his gun. The dude bolted to his car that was parked in an area concealed by trees on the property. Turns out he was the gardener. He had been keeping tabs on me, knew I was house sitting alone for my dad while he was out of town, was very high on meth, he admitted to me while I had the knife out, and had been waiting on the front porch for me to come home. Except I had used the side door that night, something I never usually did. If I hadn't have used the side door that night, I have no idea what would have happened. I also have no idea what would have happened if my friend hadn't come back when I called him, because the guy was starting to get aggressive and trying to come towards me right when my friend got there with his gun out. We like to joke about it now, but it was the worst scenario I have ever experienced where I wanted to just run and get the FK away. Story 5. Was walking from a local shopping mall to the train station so I could go home. The shortcut went through a huge long tunnel and was out of sight from the road, and wasn't used unless you knew the area. When I got to the tunnel I looked up and saw one guy standing right at the other end of the tunnel, in the middle, just looking in my direction. Like he was waiting. Every hair on my body stood on end. I felt like I needed to vomit, and before I knew what I was doing my feet turned me around and started walking fast away. He started walking after me and said, "Don't worry, it's not like I'm going to rape you." I ran and walked right on the edge of a highway in plain view of cars in case he ran after me. I couldn't stop shaking for an hour. Story 6.so I'm in middle school. 6th grade 1, thinking to get my bus in the morning I had to walk about a mile or so to the back of our neighborhood. About 6 AM I'm chillin' waiting for the bus alone. This man walks up to me and I can't remember what he was talking about, but I do remember him trying to get me to go to a house across the street. I kept telling him no and that if I missed my bus I'm getting my ass whooped, early 90s SMH. The more I said no the more agitated he got, and I remember being more scared than I've ever been, and trying to figure out where I could run. I'm literal trying to gauge if I could jump into a bayou that's catty corner to us, Houston lol, and not die. But like AF asterisk in Boss, my old elementary school bus driver comes hauling ass down the street, stops the bus and flies out the door screaming at the guy who runs to a car parked in front of the house he was trying to get me to go to and drives off. She bangs on the door to the house and they tell her everyone who lives there is accounted for and they have no idea who the man was. She took me home and from that day on my stop changed to a block away from my house. Her name was Ms. Francine and I'm convinced she saved my life that morning. I'm in my 40s now, but telling the story to my kids still makes me sick to my stomach. Story 6. One time I was out in Colorado with some buddies hiking near the top of a mountain. Some bad weather started to roll in but the top was only 15 minutes away so I went ahead while they went back down. As I was getting to the top I felt static in the air and the hair in my head started to stand up. I immediately started to panic cause I thought I was about to get struck by lightning, so naturally I ran down without ever getting to the top. I'm not sure if I was gonna get struck, but I sure as hell wasn't sticking around to find out. Story 7. Hiking in the Rocky Mountains, on a trail I knew pretty well. I was leading a group of kids, maybe 20 or so middle school aged children from the camp where I worked. I turned a corner and saw a jawbone of a deer. Pretty cool, showed it to the kids. Didn't have any flesh on it, so I assumed it was pretty old. 100 feet further down the trail I find another bone. Femur maybe. I specialized in insect populations, not deer anatomy. This one looked a little fresher. Another ways down, another bone. I'm getting a little nervous at this point, so I explain that we should probably turn around and head back. My students all groan that they want to see more dead stuff, but I shepherd them down the train and back to camp. 2 days later we got a call at the camp that someone had been attacked in the area by a mountain lion. Apparently a mountain lion had set itself up in the caves on the cliffside and it had gotten pissed when someone got too close. I'm glad we left the area, even if my students would have loved to see more dead stuff. Story 8. I must have been around 10 or 12 when this happened. I was walking back home one afternoon, around 3 or 4 p.m., after strolling around the neighborhood, which was usually very safe, friendly and quiet. I was on the opposite side of the block, the houses behind ours, which wasn't an issue because there happened to be a park that went across the whole block and connected to the other side, so you didn't have to go around the whole block, so I was only a few houses away. I went through the park, a park I had played at my entire childhood, without paying much attention, when about halfway through, this guy who I didn't know, definitely older than me, wearing a hoodie started calling me. "Dude, come over here one sec." What do you want?" "Come here, I just wanna ask you something, okay? Ask me from over there." No, come over, please." "No, tell me from over there." At that point, another dude that was sitting next to him gets upset. I hear, "That's it," and they both stood up quickly and started making their way towards me. I can't recall how far they chased after me, but my instincts just told me to run like hell and I did. To this day I still don't know if they were gonna mug me, if they were just taking a piss or what was happening, but it definitely scared kid me. Story 9. I'm a criminal defense investigator. I had a murder case involving 2 brothers. The one accused of the murders was very autistic, and his brother was a schizophrenic. The schizophrenic brother lived in a potato shack in the middle of the desert. I needed to talk to him several times throughout the course of the investigation, and since he didn't have a phone or electricity, I had to drive several hours out to his house and yell his name from the fence line until he came out of the shack. This investigation lasted for several years, and over time I developed a rapport with schizophrenic brother, and I kind of got to like him. He would talk your ear off about the aliens with golden eyes and the underground tunnels that connect all the Walmarts in the country, but he was pretty entertaining, and part of me wonders how much of it was a show. Schizophrenic brother eventually gets a girlfriend. She's a tweaker who has mistaken his schizophrenia for meth-induced psychosis. I talked to her a few times in jail when she was sober, and she was surprisingly charming and insightful. The last time I go to see schizophrenic brother, it's a dark winter night and tweaker girlfriend is there. She's lurking in the shadows and staring daggers at me the entire time I'm talking to him. I cut off his conversation about the speakers in his fillings and walked back to my truck to leave. A minute later, schizophrenic brother comes running out and tells me that he wants to show me something in his shack. He's never invited me inside before, and I'm not thrilled by the prospect. The whole thing feels off to me, so I tell him I have to get going, and start the truck. The look of relief on his face when I declined to go inside convinced me that Tweaker girlfriend was waiting behind the door with a hammer or something. A few months later I learned that she shot him in his sleep and stashed his body in an old refrigerator. She has since pleaded guilty to his murder. Thank you for watching.